We are back on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in Albuquerque, New Mexico on 1000 KKIM. Hey, Clay, before we talk a little bit about Doug Johnston and introduce our next guest, I forgot to mention who our guest is going to be next week, and I think this is probably an appropriate time. In the first half of the show next week, we're going to have Tobin Smith from Bulls and Bears, our old soothsayer who's been so good in his predictions. But in the second half, we are going to have literally a living legend. Phyllis Schlafly from Eagle Farm is going to be on the show. That's going to be a real exciting show.
Wow, either show could be a full hour or more.
Oh, yeah. And you talk about two diverse people on the same show. What do you think of Doug Johnston?
Oh, man, I could talk to Doug all day.
Yeah, I could,
Matter
too.
of fact, people don't know this, but we did talk to Doug for about a half an hour after the show. We did a segment.
Yeah, we should have played that as well. And our second half, the second half of our Johnson and Johnston show today, is an old friend of the show, Brian Johnston, the regional director for the National Right to Life. Brian, welcome back to Taking Care of Business.
Hey, always a pleasure, you guys. So it's always good to talk. Now, Doug Johnston, are you talking about Doug Johnston in Washington, D.C.? Which Doug are you
Colorado.
I know the Doug you're thinking of. Doug Johnston in Washington, D.C. used to work for Focus on the Family once upon a time, didn't he?
And National Right to Life, yeah.
Yes, many moons ago. I knew him.
No, this is Doug. He's a consultant. He's a business consultant. He lives in Colorado. He writes...
Author, yeah.
Yeah, author, lecturer.
Yeah. Wrote a great book called No Tomorrows about the Obama administration. So,
wow.
Great show with Doug. Actually, the two of you would get along great. I could see the two of you on the same show.
Oh, I can tell that, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to start off with something that's in the news right now, ask you and Clay about, because Clay and I haven't had a chance to talk about this. Here we have this 10-year-old back east that needs the lung transplant. And Sebelius, Secretary of Health, said that, unfortunately we can't. She's made the determination that we can't give it to her because I think, if I remember reading this correctly, she has to be 12 years old to qualify. This, to me, smacks of the first shot in the death panel that, Sarah Palin so aptly called it, in the Obama health care plan. Is that what it looks like to you guys? Because here it is, we're denying health benefit to a 10-year-old because she doesn't hit the requirements.
Well, they're also denying cancer treatment to senior citizens.
Well, that one we know, but here's a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I'm just saying, these are death panels.
Okay.
There is death panels.
Yeah.
Although I agree entirely. What we're talking about here is the federalization of your health and my health. That's what we're looking at, and I think Doug Johnston's, the title of his book is prescient. It's so insightful. Literally, No Tomorrows is how the Obama administration is viewing the role of government. We're just going to do everything we want right now, and the implications, in a sense, excuse my French, the implications be damned. And the reality is that we can't have the federal government running health care. It doesn't make sense. It's the worst possible solution anyone could come up with, and yet that's exactly what we have. As you're both implying, the implications now, obviously, why do you want insurance? And you guys are businessmen. You understand this. You want insurance not for headaches or something you need aspirin for. You want to have insurance for catastrophic situations when you really need it and you don't have the ability to deal with that problem, be it your health, be it your house, be it your car. And if I get a scratch in my car, I don't want to send that to my insurance agent. I don't want to have the insurance company pay for that because that's going to create more problems. I want car insurance, though, because I might get hit by somebody tomorrow, and I can't take care of that scratch by myself. That's the case with health insurance. We need health insurance for the very thing that's being denied for me. The very reason. When you're elderly, you're more likely to get debilitating illness. That's when you want health insurance. And when they say, no, at a certain age, we're going to cut it off. That's only going to save the federal government money. It doesn't save your life. It doesn't save anybody anything except the federal government. And now this 12-year-old, it's ironic that adults, if she were an adult, she'd be eligible. But in fact, just think about it in a practical human level. This girl has potentially much more life ahead of her. She has so much more you might say there's a better reason, a better financial reason, if you will, to give her the opportunity to be on that transplant list. So it even makes more sense in terms of saving money. Instead of, you're going to give a lung transplant to a 40-year-old man, he's on the list, but a 12-year-old girl shouldn't be because she doesn't meet the right bureaucratic standard. And it isn't even necessarily saving money, because that 4-year-old only has, in terms of the odds, a limited time. He has maybe another 40 years left. That girl has most of her lifetime ahead, but you're not going to save her life.
Amazing.
So this is bureaucracy run amok. This is out of an Orwellian novel, and yet it's your life and my life, because we have not opposed Obama, and we must stop Obamacare.
No question about it. We're having a conversation with an old friend, Brian Johnston, the regional director of the National Right to Life.
Well, Brian, first off, that young girl isn't paying taxes, and she's just a drain on society. So that's part of the reason that they're probably not going to do it. But I had a different question for you in a different direction on abortion. If a child is born alive because it's a failed abortion, is it considered a fetus? Is it considered tissue, or is it considered a baby?
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right, and that's it's very clear historically before Roe versus Wade and it's very clear in science. This has always been a human being, and it is those semantic twists and turns that you're just referring to there that has allowed our society to have the gosnells that we're seeing, where literally a child is born. In fact, if the child is born, then the pregnancy is over. The child is born, then once the child has left the womb, then the pregnancy has been terminated. You and I, all three of us, and every listener, is actually the product of a terminated pregnancy. We were born. The pregnancy has ended. And if that's the goal of Planned Parenthood, and if that's the goal of NOW, is basically to allow women to terminate pregnancy, then that goal's been reached. But the sad thing is that isn't their goal.
Yeah, great.
Their goal is to kill that human being.
Yeah. Brian, you and I have talked about this 20-some-odd years ago. I remember having a situation where there was a woman with twins. She had one that had to be delivered in the third trimester. That baby was untouchable because the baby was delivered, but the baby in the womb at that time still could have been killed. So it was actually safer for the baby to be born than it was to be in the woman's womb, which is insane, absolutely insane. Speaking of insanity, and we had John Bolton on last week, and then we had Shannon Grove, our assemblywoman, who's fantastic.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and Shannon, I read something where she really stood up against this, but AB 154 is going through the assembly now, and that's just a totally insane bill in Sacramento. Can you tell our listeners a little more about that and where it is in the process?
Yeah. Well, Clay and Marty, you guys are familiar with the madness up here. I'm so glad you have Shannon on, because she's one of the few sane voices in the California Capitol. AB 154 is an extraordinary measure that you don't even have to be pro-life to look at it and be opposed and appalled. It changes the definition of who an abortionist can be in California. Right now, in order to do an abortion, and ever since abortion was legalized years ago in California, it allowed a physician to do an abortion. And initially it was under certain rare circumstances back in 1967. And well, we all know some of the litany that you hear about. The Therapeutic Abortion Act in 1967 said in the cases of rape, incest, life of the mother, severe fetal deformity, and only before 20 weeks. And then it had to be done by a physician. Well, as you know, Roe versus Wade, 73, said, no, you don't need those excuses anymore. It's all about choice. It's all about terminating the pregnancy, as we referred to earlier. It's about being unpregnant, and a woman has a right to be unpregnant, ostensibly. Now, what AB 154 says, you don't need to be a doctor to do it. You don't need to be a physician to do an abortion. And this has been sent by Planned Parenthood to our legislature. Again, our legislature is really one of the craziest in the nation.
Does it matter how far along they are?
Excuse me?
Does it matter how far along they are before they can?
Oh, yeah, no, that isn't even addressed in 154.
So it could be
all
8 months.
154 says is you no longer. Right now, abortion is available on demand in California. But right now in California, for it to be a legal abortion, it must be done by a physician. This only changes who does it. And AB 154 allows non-physicians, and that includes midwives. It includes nurse practitioners and nurses. So these people have, you might say, a very tangential relationship to pregnancy in a medical sense. But it's very tangential. You know, midwives are an interesting phenomenon, but they're not medically trained. And they are not medically trained for these kind of circumstances of invading a woman's body and tearing out not only parts of the baby inside, but sometimes, and this is what's very common, for vacuum aspiration abortion, is actually harming that woman's body.
Incredible.
But the vacuum aspiration abortion, and that's what just to answer what you're asking, Clay, the AB 154 allows non-physicians to do vacuum aspiration abortion, which is the most common. It's
Brian,
essentially a very, very powerful vacuum cleaner.
Okay, let's pick up. Let's pick up there when we come back from the break. Unfortunately, we're up against the break. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio News Talk 1180.